All right, well, again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us here in person as well as online. My name is Glenn Engelberg. I am the Assistant Director of Recruitment for the GEM program, or the Master of Science in Global Energy Management, but we're all about the acronyms right here. And of course, we are with the University of Colorado, Denver, or CU Denver Business School. And here today, we have three awesome GEM alumni who are going to go ahead and discuss a little more about their firsthand experience in the program with the curriculum, what it's like, the balance of work and school, and really just go ahead and understand their perspectives too, because they are from several different energy fields as well. So it should give a nice holistic view of that. And also at the end here, we should have a few minutes for Q&A session as well. So don't be shy. I'm not, and they would love to field your questions. And once again, thank you to everyone here in person and online that's joining us here today. So before we go ahead and get started here, I'm just going to give a quick, maybe like 3-4 minute overview of the program, just to make sure everyone's on the same page, because I know everyone's familiarity with it may vary a little bit. And then we'll spend the majority of the time with some prepared questions for our beautiful panelists over here today. And we should have a few minutes for a Q&A afterwards, and a couple of GEM upcoming events that we'll announce as well too, which may or may not be in the same room. So also for the audience online as well, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and just type them into the chat box, and we'll try to get to them at the very end as well. And as I mentioned, we have some prepared questions for our panelists here today. Before I go into so a quick spiel, so to speak, for the GEM program, I'd love each of the panelists to go ahead and introduce themselves here, which is their name, energy background, and job. And then I'll give a quick intro for the GEM program, and we'll begin with the questions. So I'll begin to my left.
My name is Garrett Peterson. I am Vice President of Project Development with Pivot Energy. We're a firm headquartered here in Denver and then offices in Chicago and St. Louis. And we focus on C&I, solar, and distributed generation solar.
Hi, everybody. My name is Natasha Herring. I'm a senior consultant at Navigant. I work up in Boulder. We're headquartered in Chicago. Anything else? That's it.
Hello, I'm Chris Noonan, and I'm a surface landman with Crescent Point Energy. We're a Canadian oil and gas operator based out of Calgary. We do have an office here in the Denver area, and I focus primarily on our Utah assets.
All right, well, thank you so much for that quick introduction there of everyone. And now I'm just going to give just a couple of kind of quick facts and overview of the GEM program, and then we'll get to the prepared questions for our panelists here today. So in terms of the GEM program itself, a couple quick important notes. One is that it's 100% energy focused. So whether it's renewables, utilities, oil and gas, we focus on all the different aspects of the energy field with the business, leadership, finance side, and we'll talk a little more about some courses, even some electives that we have. But I think another important point to note is that it's offered in a hybrid online format too, which is specifically designed for full-time working professionals here. And we have, and this allows our students to go ahead and continue to work full-time while doing the program part-time and still completed in 18 months. And with the program, it's been around for 10 years. We have our 21st cohort starting here in July. I see a few members of that cohort actually are here, and a couple that are going through the application process. So we know we've been around for 10 years. I have over 400 students and alumni, many of whom are in the Denver, Colorado area, but also we have some internationally from, I know I was sat in a class recently just to kind of check in, get the perspective. We have students from Bangladesh, South Korea, and South Africa. I don't envy their flights, but I do envy their dedication. So, and we have many students that are out of state as well in the program too. Something else that I believe is worth noting is that we did a survey recently of like, give or take, the 400 students and alumni in the program, and actually about 55% of them, by the time they graduated, had a new job opportunity or were promoted, and a third of those actually received a salary increase of 10% or higher as well, which was really great to see. So, obviously it's all about the return investment. That means a little bit of something different for everyone. For the way that the program is set up, just quickly, it kicks off with the cohort weekend, which is always a Friday through Monday. So since most of us work Monday through Friday, it minimizes the time you have to take off work, and you can save your PTO vacation days for what they're meant to be for that. Those 4 days here will be here at the CU Denver Business School downtown in person. You do a lot of your lecture hours. some group work. We do a couple networking events like a trivia night, or sometimes go fantasies and do like a basketball, or it's like a Colorado Rockies game, and some networking and social events too. And we also have something called the Executive in Residence program, which is really unique, and it's been a great part of the program, where we actually will have like a C-suite professional or senior VP that will come in here to do some one-on-one mentorship sessions you can sign up for, and a couple of small group lunches as well. And actually our current one is Young Lee. He's one of the nicest guys ever. He's great. He's the director of solar at Panasonic, and he's actually going to be leading a site tour that some of our students will be going on in April as well. So we do some site tours as well too. So that's just a quick example there. And after those first 4 days here in person, the remaining 10 weeks are online in a flexible format that's deadline driven. You can go ahead and log in on your own time, and that allows our students to continue to work full time while doing the program. But I'm not sure how many people have taken online classes before. I know I've taken some that you feel a little disconnected, let's say, with that. But I think having those first 4 days in person here really makes the online component a lot more fruitful, a lot better conversations and collaborative. And even actually I was talking to Dr. Hussein, Dr. Man Hussein, who teaches our technical aspects of energy science class, and he mentioned that sometimes he'll have about like a designated office hours where 3 or 4 people will go ahead and log into like a group discussion that he'll actually record and send to the rest of the group as well. Because as we know, if one person has a question about something, chances are a few others do too. So they're very flexible with that as well. And on that note too, this will be the last note here before we go ahead and get to the questions, but I think the faculty is definitely worth mentioning as well. The majority of our faculty still work full-time in the energy field, and on average have at least 15 to 20 years of energy experience. So they really draw on a lot of real-world examples, case studies, or certain instances that happened to them that week or the month before, to go ahead and make it much more of an applied theory or practical approach, which a lot of our students can go ahead and utilize for the program. And in terms of the curriculum too, I know we'll talk about it here in a second, but of the 12 courses that we have, 3 of them are electives as well. So you can go ahead and we have a travel course. I believe Natasha, you said, right, that you had the privilege of doing the travel course where we go to Washington, D.C. for 2.5 days and London for 5 days to learn about international and domestic energy policy. Or you can have one on the commercial management and renewable energy and leadership side that's taught by 2 former alumni that work in the wind and solar field respectively. So in addition to like the 9 business and leadership classes, we also have 3 electives to kind of tailor more towards your specific interests. But enough about me talking. That's not why you're here. If it is, I'm sorry to hear that, but thank you. But as I mentioned before, we do have a few prepared questions here for our panelists. So let's get started, right? All right, so the first question will actually be for Garrett and Natasha. And the question is, Garrett and Natasha, what was the benefit of learning from a cohort of students with different energy backgrounds? And then to add to that, was it helpful to meet them in person during the cohort weekends? And Garrett, why don't you start us off?
Sure. I think one of the best things about the actual program is it brings together a very unique and diverse group of people with different energy backgrounds and expertise that you would never have the exposure to within your company. There's just so many different viewpoints and roles people play in the energy industry. Some of them you don't even know they exist until you actually get to meet them. So just that background is a huge asset of the GEM program. But everybody there is focused on energy. And so you all have, I guess I would say, a common interest, whereas a standard MBA program, it could be the most broad-ranging, different types of business that you might not connect with people on certain levels because of that. So I think that's really one of the great parts about the cohort. And then meeting them in person, you just have a better connection to them. Like Glenn said, when you leave after 4 days, when you're working in your groups and you video chat with somebody or you're emailing, you have this connection. Oh, that person works for Excel Energy or they work in solar. And it helps with the online version being a little more personal.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Garrett. I think just one of the benefits of having everyone in energy is you also get the most up-to-date information. Sometimes when you go to like business programs, it's like, this is what happened a long time ago. But when you're with your cohort, it's like, oh, this happened last week or last month or last year. So I think that kind of like brings the relevancy of what you're learning kind of to the present. And then just practically, you know, you're going through different classes. And so if I'm like, I work in utilities, that's what I forgot to say at the beginning, in the utility industry. And so if I'm doing an oil and gas project and I'm on a team with someone who has that expertise, I can really benefit because there's not possibly a lot I can offer short of like what I learned from class. So I really think just the strength in like having a diverse cohort, you can really increase kind of, or cover your weaknesses or increase your strengths just learning from other people. There are a lot of group projects, and I think that's a huge benefit of the program. Instead, especially if you're not right out of school, you can really like learn together as opposed to like go do this by yourself and like figure it out via the book. And yeah, I really think the in-person weekend is great. Sometimes we have people, we often are in a cohort, but sometimes there's people that take their classes slower at a different pace. There's also maybe some professors that come in and out. And so to have that kind of like face-to-face introduction, or like what dates and times work for you for meetings, just like practically to get all of that out of the way, as well as enjoy some happy hours and networking. It really kind of, I feel like is the glue to keep like the online portion kind of active and going. And I know throughout the program, I look forward to always coming back to like cohort weekend, hooray. Like it's a long weekend of like being, you know, taught out and learning, but it's really kind of like this fun kind of time with my cohort that I look forward to.
Wonderful. And actually one thing I forgot to note as well too is that, of course, it varies for each class, but typically I think what about somewhere between 75 to 80% of cohort are working in the energy field too. So unlike maybe, I don't know, like an MBA or some more general program, it is really interested in drawing those different perspectives, and having the chance to meet in person under the cohort really kind of brings it to another level. So thank you for that. And this next one here actually is for Chris and Natasha. So Chris, we'll start off with you first here. So can you comment on why it was helpful to have faculty, you know, that have extensive energy experience, and maybe some examples, or talk about how they were able to apply that experience to the curriculum?
Sure, and I think that's one of the strong suits with the program is the faculty and dedication that they bring to the program. So we were lucky enough to have professors based here in Denver, but also ones who were based across the country, Texas, Oklahoma, and again, everyone's focused on the energy industry. So it kind of gives you that commonality and thread to say, all right, let's all work on this together. And so they'll present you with problems that you have to utilize your cohort for and reach outside your area of expertise. And they really do a good job of bringing that together, not only during the weekend that you're together for the cohort weekend, but also online. So they're always available, whether they're local or they're farther away. And we were even lucky enough to have a professor based out of Saudi Arabia. So when the program says it's global energy management, it truly means it's a global reach. And so you have dedication of local professors who give their time personally, but the ones who are based remotely are more than happy to give their time and expertise at any point in time throughout the program. So it's a big benefit I think you will find only in the GEM program to get that global expertise.
Right. Yeah, and I just echo kind of everything Chris said. I think that, yeah, it's really invaluable, similar to the students, to have professors that know exactly what they're talking about and know the nuances. I think that's one of the things when I came to the program. I was like, oh, energy, great. It's like a buzzword, and like I kind of know what it means. And then like as I went through classes, I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much I don't know. And so to have a professor like be able to walk you through, or even like open up a spreadsheet and like you're doing this wrong, like and dragging cells around is like, oh, like you really understand this, and you're like really providing, I guess, the like specific insight that I need for like, you know, the context that I'm in. And so yeah, it's invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, to even just comment on that a little bit too, actually the professor that I was mentioning earlier, who sometimes does those online like 3 or 4 like kind of group discussions, Dr. Mandia, he actually is based in Calgary and is currently teaching in China, but he still is able to go ahead and do that. So yeah, yes, they really are dedicated to that, and yeah, it's a great way to still stay connected. So the next question here is for Garrett and Natasha. Natasha, we're gonna have a lot of work for you today, so I hope you're up to it.
I'm here for it.
It's true. So, why don't we go ahead and Garrett for this first part. Garrett, can you discuss how the energy-focused curriculum was relevant to what you do at work?
Sure. It might sound like a kind of a basic answer, but it makes you a more valuable asset to your company. And I'll try to give an example. I'm going to sign a virtual PPA with a commercial manufacturing facility. They don't have land, but I have to go locate land, do environmental permitting, permitting with a county or city jurisdiction. I then have to look at that company's usage from a utility, break down their utility bill, see if there's peak cost hours, see how I size a system to offset their costs and make the PPA valuable to them, and then have to financially model that and sell that project to a third party who's going to own and finance that solar system that's providing virtual power through utility to that company. So if you try to aggregate all those parts, you've got individual teams all over the place, but you have one person kind of containing all that knowledge. And I think that's what the GEM program does, is makes you more knowledgeable as a whole, so that you're able to lead a team, start a new division of a company, expand, an office or something like that. And that's really the biggest benefit of it.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yeah, I'd agree completely. I think when my company was doing kind of some reshifting just internally, I was able, I guess, to like understand more of what's going on. Instead of, I feel like in my position, I guess in most people's position, you're privy kind of to like what your work context is. And so I feel like the GEM gave me kind of like a good excuse, sometimes via like homework, to like go figure out what your corporate sustainability mission is, or for your company. And so just with some of the homework aspects, I was like asking kind of like directors and VPs of my company's various questions, which increased obviously my visibility, but really gave me a better context of like where my company stood in the industry, or in the sector that we're in the industry. And yeah, made me kind of more knowledgeable, able to like discuss strategy and discuss where we were as a company, as opposed to just kind of my context or my work environment or my job on paper. So yeah, definitely agree.
Yeah, absolutely. And to chime in on that as well too, a lot of our program teach about the business and leadership aspects, because a lot of our students may already be in a leadership role or on the cusp of one, or even sometimes starting. I know we had some of our second cohort who started. Kimro, that was like a midstream or upstream company. So we have a lot of students who do like kind of their own consulting practices, things like that. So we do teach a lot about that aspect, and no matter which energy field you work in, and that's kind of, we're going to talk about some trends to everyone's specific energy field here in a moment. I think just having that in-person part too, where you learn like little pieces of everyone's, helps you in that leadership role, knowing how the big picture of it works together domestically and internationally with that as well. So yeah,
I think I'd piggyback on that as well from a more personal example. In our business, we're always trying to reduce costs and improve our efficiencies, and GEM really gave a lot of tools to step outside your boundaries and become more comfortable with other areas of energy that you might not be exposed to. So I'm an oil and gas operator, but I have worked on some of our surface assets and tried to improve our efficiencies. And one of the ways of doing that was to try and use our secondary recovery via solar power. So we're trying to step outside the bounds and look at what might be possible to try and improve our economics. And having the GEM background, being able to express to management that, hey, I think I want to look at a solar project, which I helped model in the program, and say, we can use this on oil and gas development to help lower our costs. That's one of those tools that GEM gives you to help us step outside your bounds and learn something new and actually be applicable to your company.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. Even I think that's a perfect example too, Chris, because even though your primary role is oil and gas, there's always going to be almost like a Venn diagram in the middle, right? There's going to be some overlap and understanding how the other energy industries can go ahead and help you be a more valuable asset, more efficient with that, something that any company's going to want.
Absolutely.
I want it, yeah. So, well, thank you for that. So as I mentioned a moment ago, our next set of questions here will focus a little bit more on each panel's specific energy industry, and then assuming that time we'll finish with a couple more questions that are specific to the GEM program. So the first one here is for Garrett. Garrett, can you discuss the transition and a little bit more about the increased emphasis you've seen in the renewable energy in Colorado and what trends you anticipate in the future for the renewable side?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different factors happening in Colorado to push renewable energy. Governor-elect Jared Polis has a plan to be 100% renewable by 2040. That is ahead of California and Hawaii in terms of timeline. Xcel Energy, the largest utility in Colorado and one of the largest in the U.S., has stated it will be 100% renewable by 2050. Pueblo, Durango, Denver, Fort Collins, Summit County, and numerous other cities in Colorado have taken the Ready for 100 pledge that is pledging to be 100% renewable by 2035. So it's even ahead of the state timeline. And even outside of that, there's small co-ops and municipalities that are transitioning away from wholesale utility contracts and installing what I'd call like distributed energy resources, meaning small scale solar or wind, sometimes backed up by battery storage, where they don't have to upgrade their entire substation. They can just put a small energy resource on their grid. So in terms of that, there's a lot pushing Colorado towards a very high renewable energy mix. There's also going to be a continued utility scale procurement, both wind and solar. Xcel has something called Solar Connect, which is a 50 megawatt solar project that allows people to enroll in community solar. But outside of that, you'll see a lot of those distributed resources with storage, especially in the next 5 years. As the ITC starts to step down, the investment tax credit, the costs of energy are just being driven down by efficiency. And right now, the levelized cost of energy of a utility scale solar plant versus a combined gas cycle plant, the levelized cost of energy is lower over a 40-year timeline. So a lot of utilities are looking at that as the new energy mix. And this is really happening not only in Colorado, but all over the U.S. in various different stages. Minnesota, a place you wouldn't really think of, installed more than 250 megawatts of solar in the last couple of years. I'm currently focused on work in Illinois, and we've developed over 100 megawatt portfolio ourselves there, and there are probably half a dozen other companies with similar size portfolios that state will be 40% renewable by 2040. So it's individual states are continuing to install renewable energy.
Yeah, absolutely. And before getting into Natasha here in a second, something I want to comment on too is that, and I can think of several examples where we have a lot of alumni and current students too that go from the utility side to renewables, or from oil and gas to renewables, or maybe like from the finance side to utilities. So I think that's also one of the benefits that I've heard firsthand from a lot of students too, that the curriculum being a little more broad in terms of all the different energy fields, is that regardless of what the future looks like with that, you'll be ready for those opportunities.
Yeah, if I could just piggyback on that,
Yes,
there's a lot of utilities that have started their own, what I would call a development arm or development company within the utility to own on-site solar and wind assets. There's also a lot of public money and private equity that is investing purely in wind and solar. Goldman Sachs, Blackstone, a few other funds all have dedicated funds purely for renewable energy that they are actively pursuing projects with.
Absolutely, thank you. And last time I checked, I think they have pretty deep pockets. Yes. Yeah. So I have a friend who's an banker in New York. Okay. Well, Natasha,
Yeah.
We got to keep that working here. So with your experience as a senior consultant at Navigant, I know with your role, if I'm not mistaken, you work on a lot of energy modeling, impact evaluation for the utility sector. Can you talk about just like some maybe different trends or challenges you anticipate that the utility sector has to prepare for, and what that may look like?
Sure. I feel like Garrett set me up really nice.
Yeah, exactly. That's teamwork, dreamwork right there.
Yeah, I thought of like 4 or 5 kind of like general areas I think utilities are keeping their eye on. Obviously, finance, when it comes to sources, often utilities make these really large investments over a long period of time. And so they're trying to recoup costs from things that may or may not be outdated compared to where technology is now today. And so I feel like finance or finances of how much kind of like energy sources cost, whether it's natural gas, oil, renewables, is a big one. And I think that is heavily impacted by regulation. Also, just when we think of what makes sense for what state, what makes sense for what utility, I mean, even with the Trump 2020 plan that came out, a lot of clean energy programs are possibly on the chopping block, or may have to think, you know, utilities may have to think about those differently, kind of as regulation changes or swings kind of like back and forth. And so I think those two things kind of are linked together as being really important. One other thing that I find interesting, I guess, about regulation is, or kind of relates to GEM. When I was in GEM, I wrote a paper about carbon capture, storage, and sequestration. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but it's basically using carbon that comes out of power plants. And at the time I wrote it, it was definitely economically not feasible, and the technology wasn't there. But interesting enough, currently with the Trump's energy plan, which isn't so hot for the industry, but he has allowed money to be set aside for CCS, that's what it's called, which I find very interesting now, because I'm like, oh my gosh, like a couple of years ago, that was just like not possible. And so now I think utilities, as well as other companies, as you said, I think it's going to be interesting kind of like where regulation leads and where funds lead based on just regulation and things like that. Like I wonder if CCS is going to like grow. And I've heard kind of some interest from various utilities in that technology, since there is now funding for it, and technology may kind of make that accessible. Yeah, another trend is just technology and the rate of change. I mean, battery storage, cars, electric vehicles, how is that going to impact utilities? Who's going to bear the cost, which is always the big question, you know, for putting in chargers, or having chargers publicly available, or at, you know, your school or work. And so just the actual like details of how these kind of like big ideals of electric vehicles and renewables, I think having the details, that's really important for the utility industry. And then carbon emissions, obviously really important. I feel like we're 2030, you know, it's just 11 years around the way. And I think utilities as well as companies are getting to choose kind of like if they're with or not, and kind of like come out of whatever regulation that was on. And so I think that is an interesting factor as utilities bring up. And then lastly is the crew change, which is why kind of we're all here. But just typically in the industry, a lot of people tend to be older and closer towards retirement age than younger age. And so I think perfectly timed for GEM, but I think there are really opportunities for us being like GEM, and even if you're not GEM, but to take those positions and to kind of be that change that leads to the future. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's actually 10 years ago when the GEM program was founded. Remember, Sarah and I have talked about this several times. That was really the catalyst of why it was. You know, it was talking to a lot of different energy leaders and be like, there's a huge gap here. Who's going to be that next generation that's going to go ahead and have the education and wherewithal to lead the energy field? And that's actually how the inception of the GEM program happened. And 21 cohorts later, you're here listening to me. So thank you. All right. And Chris, don't worry, we didn't forget about you. And of course, I'd love to get your take on a little bit of the future of the oil and gas industry. And I know even, you know, with Garrett talking about, I know a lot of the movements towards renewables, and we keep on hearing these, you know, with commercial stuff too, but obviously there's still a huge economic impact and a lot of potential, whether it's natural gas, oil and gas, and even exporting, right? I believe I read an article saying that the U.S. is actually going to trump, I think, Saudi Arabia soon as the #1 exporter in the world. So obviously maybe shifting gears more international based, but in terms of the future of the oil and gas industries and fossil fuels, I guess what changes or trends do you anticipate, maybe like on a global scale or even locally here in Colorado?
Yeah, I think to borrow off of the statistic you gave with the U.S. eventually becoming an exporter, the IEA did acknowledge that within about 24 months, the U.S. will become a net exporter of crude and refined products, up to about 9 million barrels a day. So that's a very positive step forward for the oil and gas industry globally, as our products leave this country, become marketable internationally. And then more on the local front, I think we have definitely some trends that are changing, especially with the advent of the new Senate bill that's rolled out. So there are some headwinds with the oil and gas industry, especially when it comes to locally, but globally, I do think there's going to be a large market for the product, and things are looking up. Locally, I think we're going to run into the challenge of kind of renewing that social license to operate. It was only 5 months ago where the voters of Colorado rejected the Proposition 112, and now 5 months later, again, we're facing a very similar proposal to kind of change the headwinds of energy development in the state and relook at how the state is going to move forward. My personal belief, I think there's room for everybody here, and the utility sale and the renewables generation, along with the more traditional energy forms. But I think as a commodity, as oil and gas moves forward, again, we're bright outlook globally, and I think locally, it's going to take the efforts of the voters and the legislator and the public to really come to head and decide how we want to move forward in a new energy future.
Yeah, absolutely. See, we can all get along, all industries here, right? It's a Gem family after all. So yeah, no, thank you. And actually, I was at an event earlier today with DPC, the Denver Petroleum Club, and I was talking to a gentleman there actually too about this as well, with kind of the comment on what you were talking about, Chris, and saying like how like even his company as well that's based here, and there's a lot, like you mentioned that I think Calgary, right, is where the main headquarters of your company is, but a lot of companies that may have basins or different developments internationally or domestically, but will still be here, you know, or finding different ways, you know, for natural gas or other places with that too. So yeah, I think there's definitely, as a transition inevitably, you know, will happen, there's still a big piece of pie for everyone to be an integral part of it as well. So now getting back to a little more about the GEM program here, this question is for Natasha and Garrett. And Natasha, why don't we have you go first here? Can you speak to the benefit of the hybrid curriculum for GEM that allowed you to continue to work full time while doing the program, and any wisdom or advice you'd have for prospective students out there? I'm sure it'd be appreciated.
Yeah, so I really appreciate the hybrid program. It's the only reason I was able to go back to school, just as practically I wasn't able to stop working and go to school. So it worked well, and I like that over the online, just online programs. I think practically it worked actually really, really well. I travel a fair share for work, and so being able to access GEM videos, the videos that were recorded online or my computer, my laptop, anywhere I had Wi-Fi, made it really accessible. Yeah, could listen kind of anywhere. And so that, yeah, that made the class more accessible. I could also write and email, obviously, but chat and respond to like discussions as well on the fly. And so I really appreciated that. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
I'd echo what Natasha said. I wasn't in a position to go back to school full time and stop working. And the hybrid status or the hybrid curriculum really does allow you to set up your schedule. The cohort weekend is obviously Thursday or Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. You have to be there for that. After that, if you want to do lessons at 5 a.m., you can. If you're traveling for work, I did quite a few lessons from hotel rooms and on airplanes. It's really flexible. And I think the professors also being in the energy industry, but knowing that you have a life and you have a family and things like that. I know I had one where I was trying to close out a project and I could not focus on what we were actually doing in class for at least like a week. They were completely fine and understanding of the situation that, you know, your job does come first. You're putting in the effort here, but you're able to be flexible and turn in an assignment a week later if that's really the case. And I think in terms of tips, the first quarter is going to be a little bit of a whirlwind.
You gotta get back in school mode.
Yep. Yeah. Trying to keep your head above water. And I think for me, I'm pretty type A, but scheduled blocks in my calendar, like, so I couldn't just say, oh, I should do that, and I've got other things to do. Like, it was like 6 to 10 p.m. 3 nights a week. That was blocked off. And then like Sunday afternoon, Sunday evenings were blocked off as well. And if you can get into that mode, that definitely helps you prioritize. And I think after your first quarter or two, you learn, do I need to do all the readings? Do I need to watch all the lectures? You figure out what works for you as a student. Yep. And it's manageable. I mean, it's not easy, but it's entirely manageable.
Yeah.
I want to add one
Please.
thing. It's just communication. To Garrett's point, I think as long as you communicate with your professors or with your teammate, you're going to be successful. I think, yeah, if you're like, I can't focus and just don't talk, it's not going to work out well. And because everyone's everywhere, it helps a lot. So just communication would be a big tip.
Yeah, and then one other thing to chime in on that too as well, thank you Tina for your feedback there, is that having those first 4 days in person, your instructors will also go over expectations, curriculum, what are your big projects, so you know what it's like. And even if you're not as type A as I am as well, nothing wrong with that, yeah, or if you're maybe that, you can really plan ahead to know how to prioritize your time with different events that are going on. We even have the next actually 2 years planned out with when the cohort schedules are. So you really can do that in those first 4 days to get the expectations, meet with them, along, constant communication as something comes up is absolutely vital, but it's challenging but doable. I think it's a really good way to put it. And last question actually we have here before we're into a couple other upcoming events and a Q&A here. The first is this is for Chris and Natasha. So Chris, why don't we have you go first here? What's your involvement been like with the GEM program since you've been a GEM alumni?
Yeah, so the GEM program has done a great job of keeping the 21 cohorts involved in the alumni. There's events that occur all the time, from the speaker series to if there's an energy event around town, you can guarantee you're going to see Glenn and maybe Michelle there manning a booth. So you guys have always been very accessible, and I get an opportunity to run into alumni around town, which is fantastic. But I think the biggest thing from an alumni perspective is the friendships that you'll make during the time you're in your cohorts with one another. You head into this with the idea that you're going to be working hard for 18 months or a little bit longer if you choose to change the program up a little bit. But you'll have an opportunity to not only dig within yourself and work hard for that, but you're also going to rely on your teammates in your cohorts. And those relationships that you'll build over those 18 months will continue on. So I've been lucky enough to have the opportunity to continue to be involved with members of my cohort, and I rely on them and lean on them for conversations about the industry, where things are going within the business, maybe business questions or even family issues. So it's been almost a decade since I started the program, and I've been lucky enough again to stay involved with the program and make sure these friendships continue on for foreseeable future. So GEM is really about building those friendships and those relationships and using those moving forward as your alumni.
Yeah, and I just add to everything Chris said. I think from those relationships too, I know there's many companies that have been started. I know, whether that's writing papers or it's actually starting companies, business ventures. So they're your friends, but they also could be your future business partners. There's also been job offers because from alumni or to peer. I know having access to professors, granted I'm local, so the professors that are here are great resources. So they've extended kind of an open hand. And so being able to discuss with them kind of specifics about my situation or where I want to go, I think is really valuable. For me, the GEM program blew kind of my mind of what I thought energy was. And so I was like, oh, wow, this is really cool. And it gave me a handful of depth, but a lot of breadth about the industry. And so after I graduated is really when I was like, okay, this is what I want to focus on. This is where I'm going to go. And having the support of those professors that are no longer professors, they're almost like friends now, to be like, okay, you can take this route or this route. And just having them as an expert or someone or mentor, for lack of better words, just to help guide and help me get the specific skills that I wanted, that I got exposed to at GEM, I think it's really invaluable. And so, yeah, and I think also opportunities to speak and meet other people and continue networking. So I think
GEM alumni panels.
GEM alumni panels, right.
One of the biggest benefits of the program.
Right. And so I think similar to the program, when you're an alum, there are opportunities. It depends on how much you want to take advantage of them. Same with your learning at GEM, the professors are there, the information is there. You can make the projects applicable to your work. You can make the projects more than just a project. This is my situation, let's make it applicable now, and maybe I can take this to my company. And so I feel like the same is for an alum. It's kind of like a background of resources, and if you choose to pursue and to stay engaged, I think you can really benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, a couple of quick things before I forget as well too, is that one is, I think as everyone knows, the energy field is very big, but it's very small, right? Especially, here in Colorado, different industries. So the networking, knowing people, different events is I know, a critical part. and having those continued friendships during and after the program are. And actually, we recently developed an alumni website a little while back. It's almost like a hybrid of, like, for lack of a better term, LinkedIn and Indeed.com, where you can actually go ahead and search different alumni across the country and world by region or by the specific industry that they're in. We also have new job opportunities we post on there. I know we've had a couple recently from Excel Energy or Res America. So it's a way to kind of go ahead and keep that going. As Natasha said, like anything else, the resources are there. It's a matter of going ahead and take advantage of the ones that are. So thank you again for all that feedback and answer those questions there. I did want to leave a little bit of time here for Q&A for those here that are online as well as in person. Before that, there are a couple quick things I want to go over here as far as some upcoming events and a couple key dates. The first is we actually have a Gem webinar series that I'm doing, and it's going to be 3 parts with oil and gas, renewables, and utilities. And the oil and gas on the evolution of energy will actually be on March 26th. So there's 2 Tuesdays from now, and I'll be with 2 Gem alumni on the oil and gas industry, including one actually Lee Morrison, who transitioned from oil and gas to the renewable side. Speaking of which, right? From that. So in terms of signing in for that, you can reach out to me directly or check out the Gem website, and you should see that there as well. Also, we have an open house that'll be right here on the 5th floor at the CU Denver Business School on April 11th. It's an awesome event, not just because there's good food and good company, but we'll have several faculty members there, usually maybe even an executive residence, alumni, current students that you can network with, really just to get a better feel for the Gem program. And that'll be from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. On Thursday, April 11th. And then that weekend where we have classes, and I won't say names, but I know there's several here in the audience that actually sat in on classes that we had in January here. That's something that you can do as well too, because we really want to get that kind of full experience with it. So if you're interested in any of those, reach out to me directly or check out our website. At the bottom, there's an events page. You can sign up for those events. And of course, as I mentioned as well, for those that are interested in applying or have questions on that, our 21st cohort does begin in July here on July 12th. And in addition to that, for those that are very ambitious and maybe want to begin before then, depending on tuition reimbursement, those kind of things, we are working with students for our April class as well. In addition to our one here in July, and contact me directly with any questions on that. Application process just takes about 2 to 3 weeks. It's not too difficult, and that's something that would help you out with as well. So, well, that's everything here. So before our Q&A session that we'll go ahead and have here as well, I just want to take a second to thank our alumni. Can we give them a round of applause? Yeah. There we go. All right. With that, so I'm sure we have a couple questions from the audience online, but for those in person, why don't we start there? So anyone here have any questions for our alumni here?
Garrett and Natasha, you guys spoke on like the marketability of like inside your company and how this program kind of benefited you. Do you think like just in the industry in general, it made you a little more like marketable?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was, I transitioned jobs just before starting the program. And I think being accepted into the program, I used that in my job interview. I think that was a little bit of a boost. And then within that job, I was still in the program, but 9 months was getting job offers from external companies. So I do think it's a big benefit, because this program really doesn't have much competition. It's very unique. And so if you're focused on the energy industry and want to stay in it, it draws a lot of attention.
Yeah, I'd agree completely. I think the only thing I'd add is I think people take notice when you stop and go back to school, not stop necessarily, but like when you go back to school, it's not just I took a certificate class or I did something, like I actually got a Master's of Science degree. And so I think that is valued both internally and externally.
Thank you for your answer. Chris, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think to Natasha's point, there's a lot of weight that goes into being able to say, we can go back to school and you can do it at the same time that you're still continuing to build your career and move forward. So the hybrid program that Gem offers is fantastic in that if anyone can find the time to just give a little bit of time throughout their week, they can still continue to move forward, not only in their career, but also more academically as well. So that's something that doesn't require you to stop. You can always keep moving forward.
Great.
Oh, that was
Please, no, part two. No.
just want to say thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll
Sure. I guess my question is for all of you. I'm curious if you've had any feedback about the recognition of the credential as opposed to something like an MBA. What does, I guess, the general industry think of the degree in comparison, and what is your thoughts, for example, 10 years after going through the program?
Right.
Where do you feel like it's benefited you over something like that?
I think personally, if you guys don't mind if I dive in, I think the curiosity factor is one of the biggest benefits, because if you see an MBA on a resume, people just kind of breeze over it and say, okay, you've got an MBA. But when they look at you, you say, you have a master's in science. Tell me more about that. And I think that's the biggest draw to this, is the fact that it will pique curiosity, and someone will want to say, well, why did you get a master's in science? Why didn't you just get an MBA? But then you can go and explain that here's why I chose to select this program in particular. So it's the hybrid program that benefited me, not only personally, but academically. It's the ability to focus on energy and really focus on the faculty and the cohort that is really only driven by staying within the energy industry and growing within the industry, whether it's staying in your current roles or moving to a new type of energy. So to me, that curiosity factor has been a benefit, and that's where I see the biggest draw in getting the Master's of Science. Is it's really going to bring a focus to you and have people ask those direct questions of you. Why did you choose this program?
Yeah, for me, so I actually wanted to get an MBA. Before I found Gem, I was like, I want to get an MBA. And I think back then I was like, I also want to be in the energy industry. So when I started looking for programs, this program kind of hit everything I wanted-ish. I think you should definitely ask yourself if you want an MBA versus the MS degrees. I think they're very different. I agree when an MBA obviously is more general, can be applied to energy, but also to any industry field. Sometimes I think, and this is probably personal perception, so I won't put this on anyone, but when you see an MBA, it's almost more like a business, like I want to be in strategy or finance and just kind of go the business route. I think with the MS, you have a little bit more diversity if you want to stay technical, or if you want to kind of switch and have that more like technical instead of I just know how to do sales, or I just know how to read an income statement. And so I think for me, because I, way back when, decided I wanted to be in energy, it made sense for me, because I was like, if I would get an MBA, I would apply it to the energy industry anyways. So this is kind of like a win-win. But I do think a lot of it is what you want to be a part of your story, and then kind of how you sell that, whether you want to get an MBA. I know a couple of people graduate here and go on to get an MBA because they want either the name recognition from a big school, or they want kind of like more general business application. And so I think, if that's what they want, go for it. I think this sufficed everything I wanted out of an MBA, whether it's marketing, the access to finance. I still got my technical side. I could apply it to the industry, so it fit my needs specifically.
Natasha hit the nail on the head pretty well there. In my role, I'll just speak personally. My undergrad was environmental science and biology. I'm not a finance guy. So for me, an MBA wasn't exactly the route that would get me to where I wanted to go. I've heard, the people say, oh, it's a master's of science versus an MBA. For me, companies have said, no, you put in the time, you put in 18 months or 2 years or whatever to get an advanced degree, and it's relevant to your career path. And, I know enough about financial modeling and marketing and some of the general stuff I've learned in an MBA program. But if I have to do an energy model for a utility, I'm going to our analyst who has a finance background. And I'm also not, my career path isn't necessarily like CFO. So from that standpoint, it fit the way I wanted to go. And you do have, I think there's at least one person I know from our cohort is pursuing his MBA through CU Denver.
We have a couple that get a dual option.
And if that's truly something you want, you've got the ability, but it's also what's your path in the energy industry. So
Thanks a lot.
Oh, can I say one more
Yeah.
thing? I just wanted to mention that similar to like, shoot, I'm like, that say, but you can, I guess because this program gave me the breadth that I wanted, now I have the degree, whether it's an MBA or an MS, to like go in the depth that I want to go. So like I talked about meeting with professors, like this is what I want to be an expert in. Now I don't need to like have another credential, like I already have that. And I can go take the couple of Coursera courses and take my practice and like get to the skill level I want to be without having a huge investment or of another, you know, however many dollars to get that MBA behind my name. So,
Yeah, and actually just to chime in on that before we get into another question here too, is that, I mean, working on the admissions side, being the assistant director of recruitment, I work with every prospective student, and I can candidly say that the majority of students that I work with initially were looking at an MBA, but what they have in common is that when they found the program, they're like, you know what, I do want to be somewhere in the business or leadership side of the energy industry. And I think that's the key, and all of you hit that right on the head, which is so critical. And it's like, and it's kind of to the point is, okay, if you know you want to be in the business or leadership side and learn about that specifically of the energy industry, then having a program that will still give you the MBA components, but 100% energy focused with a cohort of energy focused students from all different breadths, along with faculty that have that experience, it just makes sense for a lot of them. So, and of course, there's a dual option for those that maybe get unlimited tuition reimbursement or something, you know, that just want to continue. But yeah, I think I saw we had another question.
I just wondered if maybe you could speak a little bit more about your path as like coming into the program, and if you knew exactly what you wanted to do and how your design program changed your direction.
I can start. So I was actually only a couple years out of undergrad, so I was kind of one of the younger members of my cohort, and I expected to get my MBA like at least 5 to 10 years after my undergrad. So this program came way earlier than I expected. I think my background is in engineering, and hold on, I lost my train of thought. Environmental engineering, environmental and mechanical. And so the desire kind of to go back to school is just to get kind of another expertise, kind of get my MBA to understand kind of the industry globally. I think the reason I chose consulting is because I wanted to get a big picture of the industry and didn't want to like commit fully to like solar or wind and then have that kind of like die out or that be the only thing that I knew. And so the program gave me a great breadth into, like, because my job did as well, but the program added to that. And so I think, yeah, it's been really beneficial.
I think kind of to piggyback off of that same thought, I graduated my undergrad with a liberal arts degree in political science minor. So I was very broad to start with, and then I had to figure out what to do from there. So I found my way into the energy industry, and I joined the GEM program, and I realized that energy is where I wanted to stay. You know, I'm working on the oil and gas side right now, but you never know what the future holds. But I was very excited about making sure that I stayed focused on energy and didn't get distracted by kind of the broader picture of which an MBA might offer. And this was a new program when I first started into it. And again, I'm glad to see that it's still continuing forward and still continuing to inspire people to focus on energy and making sure that that's the path forward. So to me, it was more of narrowing it down and making sure that energy is the way that my career is going to progress, and GEM definitely helped keep that focus going forward.
I would say I started out of undergrad with an environmental science and biology degree. Funny enough, just found out that I actually worked for a consulting firm that Chris's company contracts with. And I worked there for a couple of years, and there was kind of a bust in the energy cycle there, and I got laid off. I started doing work in solar because it fit in my background a little bit, and I had done a lot of construction throughout my life. But I was in solar for about 4 years, and I think I hit a little bit of a plateau. And the company I was with at the time, I talked to them about what would a graduate degree do for me at that company, and they effectively said, like, nothing. We're just like a small company. We can't provide tuition reimbursement. And I started looking around, and every job that I looked at that I really, I guess you could say, aspired to was some form of MBA, master's, postgraduate degree. And so that was when I said, okay, I need to make a change here. And when, like I said, when I started in the program, that kind of actually springboarded me into a new position that was with a national solar company that opened up all kinds of opportunity.
Absolutely. I think we have time for one more question.
Just to build on what you were just asking, was saying, what was the biggest single deciding factor for each of you personally in choosing this program versus choosing a different program or
Sure.
direction?
Well, I guess two factors. I knew I wanted to stay in energy. I liked solar. I liked the direction that was going. The hybrid program, I couldn't stop working and go back to school. And this did line up with my undergrad and my background. So I guess three factors. But
yeah,
the biggest one being able to continue my education and keep working. That was a big factor that I had friends go back to school for an MBA program, but he worked for 6-7 years and then just went back to school for 2 years, took a break, did everything, and I just wasn't in that position.
Do you guys want to chime in on that as well, as far as maybe one or two biggest deciding factors for why you chose the program?
Yeah, I think my biggest deciding factor was probably the hybridness, and I just hadn't seen this hybrid program. Also, it was in Denver, and I happened just to be working in Boulder, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's down the street. What is this? And then the last thing I'll say is I know I reached out to like the program staff ahead of time, just like get information. And I think I ran into Lizzie, who may be around here, and like was super, the response I got was just really like warm and inviting and welcoming, and like, I was like, oh, this sounds like a really big family. And so I think, well, it wasn't the biggest impact, like having the program staff here and like having them respond. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Oh yes, come down. Like, we'll show you around. We'll show you, we'll get you kind of up to date if you have any questions, that sort of thing. I think the family community really added value.
Yeah, and similar, I think it's the ability to utilize a hybrid program to stay continuing in your career and then move forward academically. I think that's the biggest thing that gives prospective students the flexibility to know that you can always continue to learn and continue to grow. And when it's all said and done with, it's only going to be a benefit to you and your employer for future use.
Great, wonderful. Well, thank you again to all our panelists here today and to everyone watching online and in person. I'll close by saying that for those that are here in person as well, if you are interested, we do have actually at the table right over there, right over yonder, printing use, yeah, that we have a couple of brochures for that oil and gas webinar with the registration link, along with my business card. If you have any questions on the program or are interested in it, or want to set a time to speak, we're happy to in person as well, or on the phone. And then also we have a few brochures there too. So thank you again, and please eat. We got all this food. I'm not going to eat all of it. Someone's got it. So please help yourself, and thank you again for coming.